Ah.
Okay. So anyway, we had gotten into a kind of a friendly discussion about big things in Western society, like marriage and the way that the government has a lot of say-so in it, marriage and religion and taxation, and how each one of those things could be vastly improved, like taxing wealth instead of taxing income, for the government to get out of the marriage business altogether. No laws, no rules, no regulations about marriage. Let people do what they want to do. If they want to live together, live together. If the guy wants to have four women and four women are going to put up with him, he must be quite a guy with quite a lot of money, you know. That is allowed in the United States, all over the place. Any Muslim community you go into, and you will find a lot of guys that have up to four wives, but nothing about those marriages have anything to do with government.
Hmm.
That I don't know how they do the taxation. They may, his number one wife may be the one, and the rest of them are just house girls, I guess. But within the Muslim community in the United States, polygamy is widespread. It's just not an issue because it would be too hot for the Christians to handle. But for the government to get out of it altogether. But the problem with religion is not, as we were saying, the problem with church and state and Christianity in America is not a Christian problem, it's a religion problem. And the religion problem is twofold. One is the guys who make money off of religion, and the other one is the vast majority of the people who, because of their training from childhood, believe in things that are not true.
Right.
And we believe in things that are not true, and we cling to those things that are not true because of instinct. And the instinct would be referenced to be like the nesting instinct, or even the tribal instinct. In other words, you have to behave in our tribe to get along with our tribe. You have to behave in the nest in order to get along in the nest. Even if what the people in the nest are doing are absolutely crazy, you got to go along with it to survive.
Well,
And go ahead.
I was going to say it's interesting that you're saying that, because as we've been talking, the thing that keeps coming up, keeps coming to mind is convention, and it seems like that really what we're talking about is convention, and convention is quite a prison.
It is. And the problem then is that we're not going to get society to change.
Right.
All right. That's one of the things that we have to look at right from the very beginning, that this is an instinctual thing. It's built right into our DNA. The way that we're raised as children, we tend to behave that way our whole lives. The Christians have known it for centuries. It's even in the Bible, way, way back then. They know train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he is screwed because of all of your crap, or something like that.
Well, I've heard it expressed as give me a child. I may botch this, but something to the effect of give me a child before the age of 7.
Seven.
Yeah, I've heard that one over the years. So
That one's actually Catholic. But to train up the child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it, is actually in Old Testament.
okay.
So we do that as children. And then we cling to these ways of doing things. and we cling to them as an entire humanity, as an entire society. And the society is not going to change. Only an individual now and then can figure things out for himself and then start living his own life. He can become free from that convention. So it's a waking up process, because not only do we have to wake up to the fact that we are attached to that world, but that we have to wake up every time we see that attachment arising again, because we're not quite awake. In other words, we don't want to attach to the world, but we wind up attaching to it anyway because of our habits. And so this is what sati is mostly about, because in fact, one of the things that we need to wake up to is how we were taught to feel.
Right.
An example of that would be anger, that we're taught to be angry under certain situations, like being insulted.
Yeah.
All right. So, but we are taught that. We are not taught, even though they will say it. And I heard it when I was a child. In fact, I learned this about the age of 4. Sticks and stones will break my bones, but words can never harm me.
Right.
Now, that's in Oklahoma, so I'm sure it's in Texas kind of saying.
Oh, yeah, I heard it growing up too.
Right. But why don't we teach our kids that in fact sticks and stones do break our bones, but words cannot hurt us? And yet we are always enveloped in getting angry when we're insulted.
Right.
It's a natural response, but it's also naturally fed by the set of rules, in the sense that everybody around us gets angry when they're insulted.
Right.
So they become now the role model of getting insulted. You get angry because that's what mom and dad and Uncle Joe and everybody else is doing too.
Right. Yeah.
And so there are a number of things within our society that are that way. And an example would be, in fact, one of the really big ones is sexuality, and how to handle one's sexuality. And so it starts off basically with this humorous antidote that the Christians are in the Buddhist monastery, and one of the Christians pipes up with the question is, well, what if everybody came to become a Buddhist monk and the whole world was celibacy? Humanity would die out. Have you ever heard a question like that before, or it even phrased that way?
I've never heard that question, but it's occurred to me that that's something that it exists as a possibility, even if it's, absurdly remote.
It's more than absurdly remote. It's like absurdly squared remote.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I recognize the odds of it happening are, as close to zero as you can get without it actually being zero. But,
But what that means is that it's not a black or white issue. In the sense of, it's not, well, since if everybody became a monk and everybody was celibate and nobody had any babies and humanity would die out, then that means we cannot have any monasteries to have anybody get away from the world. And the answer is no, that's not there. There's someplace a middle path. The middle path means that there's place for both. Now that we can take it from that position of celibacy, which is a very, very big, hard knock, and go back to, well, never mind about sexuality, because that's too big of an issue for, let us say, for us to deal with here on the internet right now, that we can go for the fact that we can recognize that we can come out of the world.
Right.
That we can come out of the world of taxation, we can come out of the world of religion. In fact, I have 4 of them. I call it the GREB: government, religion, education, and business. And the business is with two B's because they really are the running of the show nowadays.
Yeah.
Centuries ago, it was two R's.
Yeah.
Because religion ran everything. But now big business runs everything. And that these four things wrapped together mostly tie each individual to society completely. And it's hard to bring ourselves away from that. Now, in Thailand, it's actually quite easy, even if people don't go to the Wat. But one of the things that I saw at Wat So and Milk, this is quite funny, and that is that the boy who is brokenhearted, and I don't know or even care about the story about why he was brokenhearted, but what did his parents do with this brokenhearted young boy? They sent him to Wat So and Milk. And what did Wat So and Milk do with him? They sent him to me. And I had him for a look-sit, a student, for several weeks until he got over his pining.
Huh.
Mostly because we were laughing at him. How silly he was. I mean, you can't have her, can you? So this is the way that we look at it in Thailand, is because we have this family structure and we have this temple structure, that there is a natural safety net in the society itself that the West doesn't have. And so the first thing will happen to the Western mentality is, well, if I lose my job, I'm in real trouble. My job, my job. Now you understand that you don't feel that way so much, but Susanna does.
Oh yeah, I'll have to ask her that. I don't know.
In the sense that, well, say, ask her this question then in this particular way. Well, why don't you just quit your job at Delta?
Okay.
Yeah, why don't you just stay at home and live? We can have a wonderful life.
Well, I think we know the answer to that. I mean, but I don't think it necessarily immediately jumps to homelessness. I mean, it's...
Yes, exactly. That's the whole point. Woe is me. I need the job. Now, here's something that's quite amazing. This I found out in spades when I was at a particular company in the corporate headquarters. The name of the company was Sunoco, not the oil company, but the product manufacturing company. They make Mars bars, wrappers, and Pringle cans and that kind of stuff.
Okay.
But in that corporate hall, they had a whole long line of people who had died, who had been lifetime employees of this company. And you go down through there and you look at the date of their retirement and their death date.
Oh no.
And always within 1 or 2 years, these guys just drop like flies.
Right.
They put their whole life into the job because they need the job so much. And now when they're retired, they don't know what to do with their time. They feel useless. They feel worthless. They don't know how to be happy without tying it to the job and all the stuff related to it.
Man.
So this is a really, really big deal that we're talking about, without even going to humanity dying out because everybody's celibacy in the Wat. Oh no, let's look at it from the time structuring and the job, because that's what terrifies everyone.
Well, the time structuring, the job, and maybe you're implying this, but if you are, I'm not picking up on it. But the sense of identity that goes along with it, the sense of being someone.
Yes, that in fact is also instinctual. Identifying with things, like identifying with the tribe, identifying with the country, identifying with the political party, identifying with and being an employee of a certain company. That's something, by the way, that I did early on, was I avoided taking jobs, that I would take contracts. in the sense that the loyalty is to the profession, and the profession requires that we do a good job and finish it off and get out of here. Now, that doesn't work quite the way that it used to, but that was the mentality, that there was no loyalty to any particular company.
Right.
Well, I identify with that. And now I don't even identify with being a contractor. But you're right. Identification, identifying ourselves as Texan, identifying ourselves as working for, say, Texas Instruments or MCI. No, MCI is dead meat now. Living in Dallas, voting Republican. All of these identities that people have are part of that world that have to do with, basically, you could think of it as the territorial instinct. What is the territory of your mind?
The territory of your mind?
Yes. The territory of the mind is, one of the boundaries is, I'm Republican, they're Democrat. I'm American, they're not. They're brown, I'm white.
Mental boundaries.
The mental boundaries that we set up. This is our territory, the mental boundaries that we have, and it winds up, what the Buddha called it was views, attachments to views. So one is attachments to rites, rules, rituals, ceremonies, the way that the system works. And then the second one is attachment to the views about how we intertwine with that world out there. So this is the nesting instinct and the territorial instinct, and they're very, very deeply buried. Instinctual. We instinctually behave that way, which means that we need some sati to remember to not behave in an ordinary instinctual way, to not identify with anything. And when we do identify with things, then we need to catch ourselves doing that. I still occasionally laugh when I catch myself identifying with Democrats. Because I know that if I identify with Democrats when something nice is happening to them, I can turn to a different channel or watch another YouTube or whatever, what's coming just a second later, and now the Democrats are in a world of hurt. And I'm going to hurt along with them because why? I identified as a Democrat.
Or, the way that another way it manifests is you get somebody who disagrees with you. And because they disagree with you and you have a set of views and ideas based on identification with being a Democrat or anything else, then there's this internal tension, this internal stress that is generated. And of course, that starts getting into dukkha,
Precisely, and it takes us right back into the same world. If we identify, for instance, as being a Democrat and we're talking to a Republican, then we're going to get drawn into that world, and we did it because of our own attachment to Democrat.
Well, and they disagree with me, they're wrong, I'm right, and if they would just do this way, then things would be better, but they can't, I can't control the world, and then it just proliferates all of this junk.
Until we wake up and just say, wait a minute, they're not happy and I am. Why? Because I just woke up. Because before I woke up, I was in the same dukkha that they were.
Right.
And so we have to keep waking up and waking up and waking up to not be a Democrat, to not look at politics as an event of magnitude, but rather as Donald Trump does. Everything's a sitcom. This is just television entertainment.
Huh. It seems like, though, that with repeated, two things really. One is by recognizing the illusory nature of these things, the emptiness of these things, as well as repeatedly reminding ourselves, okay, this is something that really has no substance to it. I don't need to identify with it. It brings unhappiness and dissatisfaction that eventually those habits start to break, because I've noticed that there are some things that I don't feel that sense of identification with anymore, and now it's a very natural thing rather than something that takes a conscious action.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So using that, what you're talking about as an example, but let's look at it. What's happening commonly there in Texas is that someone voted because they have been voting for Republican for many, many elections. They vote for Republican again, and they vote for Donald Trump. They will sometimes even go so far as to make the out statement, I am a Republican.
Right.
Now that things have gotten very hard for the Republicans, this Republican that I'm thinking about here and talking about, every time he hears the word impeachment, he feels bad. Like terror. I mean, not just feel bad, but almost an impulsive terror.
Sure.
So what does he have to do to get rid of that terror? One thing is he could stop identifying as being a Republican and say, okay, the terror is in the Republican Party, but I'm not a Republican.
That would be one thing.
And that's actually more closer to the truth. In fact, that is the truth. He only is a Republican because he says so and thinks so. Other than that, and his behavior in the past, like voting behavior, but that doesn't define who he is.
Right.
It just defines the habit pattern that he is in. So he could break out of that pattern and say, I am not a Republican. Therefore, I don't have to feel bad when I hear the word impeachment. But this is what they say instead. They'll say, oh, well, I'll find another way to get out of this terror. I'll push it away. I'll say, oh, no, Donald Trump's a good dude. They can't impeach him. Look how a wonderful job he's doing. And besides, we've got all these Republicans that are going to stand with him. They're not going to impeach him. They're not going to impeach him. And so this is what the Republicans are telling themselves. It's not going to happen.
Right.
That it's all the Democrats' fault. Democrats are bad. That's why this is happening. And basically, the reality is that impeachment is quite real, quite a possibility. In fact, impeachment is not quite as predictable or as reliable as death. For instance, Donald Trump may or may not get impeached, but one thing for sure, he's going to die.
Yeah.
Me too. And so are the pups on the floor, and you and everybody.
Right.
This is what the ultimate point of religion is all about, is to help us get out of that terror. Just like the word impeachment terrifies the Republican, death terrifies humans. Doesn't terrify the dogs. The dogs can see the corpse of a dead dog, may even be his brother. And he sees that corpse and he smells it and he says, I don't like this. And then he walks away. But you get a bunch of humans around a dead human corpse and they're crying and they're, oh, this is so bad. And now we've got to do these ceremonies. I mean, why don't they just walk away? If Uncle Bob died in the house, at least throw the body out of the house. We don't want the body in our house. But after we throw it out of the house, I don't care what happens to it. Let the worms eat it, or the crows, or the dogs, or whatever's going to eat it. That's. But why do we go through all of this ceremony? The answer is because we respect death, because everything dies, and the humans know that, and the dogs don't. Or if they do, they don't care.
Right.
It's a different kind of knowledge for them.
Right.
So everything winds up being about religion is fear of death. And what kind of stories can we tell ourselves to postpone this death, just like not postpone death itself, but postpone the feelings of terror I have when I'm close to death. In other words, when I'm around a dead body, I get terrified.
Mm-hmm.
This is a normal human being until we've been around enough dead bodies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, there's truth in that.
Yes. That's why I would recommend, like the Buddha did, for students to go spend some time with some dead bodies. They were available in the time of the Buddha because in the time of the Buddha, that's basically what they did. They took the dead body out of the house and they threw it out. They just happened to collect them to the same place, sort of like the city dump for bodies.
Right.
They called it a charnel ground. I don't know why they called it a charnel ground. I don't know what that word means. But that's where the dead bodies were. In fact, there is a strip in the robe. Did you know that the robe, every monk, regardless of the size of it, every robe has the same pattern?
No, didn't know that.
Yeah, every robe has sections of this and big sections of that and this thing and that. Now, here's one of the things that the story is that Ananda and the Buddha were sitting on the side of a hill and they were looking at the rice paddies below. And they were saying, "My, isn't that beautiful?" And then Ananda had the idea, why don't the monks then make their robe out in this pattern? Well, in that place, there was that they were looking out in this area, there was a road that went through it. And so the road that goes through that rice paddy at that time is now represented as on the monk's robe, and that normally that piece of cloth comes from the charnel ground.
Huh.
That piece of cloth comes from the charnel ground because when they would wrap the bodies in the cotton cloth, they would do it in strips.
Okay.
Okay, just like you see mummies nowadays, you know, they've got these pieces of cloth. The piece of cloth that I'm talking about is about this wide, about 4, 5, 6 inches, something like that. So the point that I'm making is that the Buddha was really there much a lot for the death, that he would send the monks to the charnel ground. There's even charnel ground meditations.
I've heard.
Of the 40 meditations, 10 of them are charnel ground, but basically that's all just looking at the 10 stages of a body as it rots. The first thing that it does is that it goes through rigor mortis, and then it gets puffy and rigid. And then it starts showing busting of skin and change of heavy color and all of that. In fact, coroners have got it down to such a science that they can tell you how long it has been since the body has died.
Right.
And so finally it goes down through where the ligaments are exposed and there's very little meat left, and then down to the ligaments that are holding the bones together, and then finally even the breakup of all of the ligature so that it's only the bones that are left. And so these are the 10 stages of these charnel ground meditations. Now, every body, every physical corpse is going to go through those 10 stages that are marked out of the livid body and the swollen body and the separated bones and all of this. And so a monk does not need to go to a charnel ground and go to a whole bunch of different bodies. He just has to pick out one and just watch it do its thing.
A very long process, then.
Yeah. But if you can do that with the time that it takes for a body to go down to, I would say that 3-4 months or something like that, that's the fastest way to enlightenment that I know of. I've heard that old strong determination sittings will do it, but no doing your strong determination sittings in front of a corpse. That'll turn you loose. Of this fear of body, fear of death, fear of losing it, fear of loss of control, fear of annihilation. So the human being naturally wants to remain eternal, because throughout the lifetime, whenever he starts thinking about, or he's in the face of death, for instance, a near accident or a sickness or a worry or a medical condition, and what do people feel? Mostly they feel fear.
Okay, yeah.
All right. Here's another example. What if you broke a major bone in the body, and that it's time to put on a cast, maybe a big cast, maybe from the hip down to the foot, because you broke a bone? All right. How do people feel?
I'd say anxiety.
They would feel pain, but not just pain. They don't like the pain, and mostly they have fear. The fear of loss of mobility, the fear of I need help, the fear of, oh, will my leg ever be good enough again? All kinds of thoughts will come, but it basically has to do with fear of injury, because way back when, 100,000 years ago, getting one's leg broken was almost a death sentence.
Ah, okay.
And so a major accident like that takes us very close to the face of death instinctually, but perhaps not in reality. In fact, if the football player had a broken bone on the football field, he knows that he's going to get well taken care of. They're going to put him in the ambulance, and they're going to take him to the hospital, and they're going to fix him up, and he's going to have a nice time, and all he has to do is not move his leg, and he's good to go. Meanwhile, all the kids in the school are going to come sign the thing. He's in bliss, right? Oh, no. Oh no, that football player is on that field saying, oh me, oh my poor leg, oh me, I want to play, oh I can't get up, oh, and he spends the next 6 weeks in total misery.
Right.
Can't wait to get out of that cast. Mental. Why? He wants to follow the ways that he's always been doing it. He's not willing to take a new opportunity and say, hey, this cast, that's a miracle. Now I don't have to play football. Stupid game anyway. All it ever got was chicks.
Yeah, now he can just go. Now he can just live his life doing commercials and raking in the money.
Yeah. So we don't look at opportunities like that. We look at it as everything is a fear of death. So what happens then is that children who are raised in a particular religion, even if they get over that religion, they still don't get over the fear of death. And some of them will move from one religion to another religion. And when they do, they bring that fear of death with them, so that they'll take on the beliefs of that new religion, even though they know that the old religion is hogwash, and they should be able to discern that the stuff that's in this new religion has its own hogwash, but they can't. And so this is one of the reasons why Buddhism in the West has become ordinary Buddhist religion, that there is very little nobility in the West, while nobility is common in Asia, because when Buddhism was spread in the old days of Asia, it was spread by nobles. And that when we say nobles, we have to understand that first off, it goes back to the word Aryan, and that Aryan in the time of the Buddha was also hereditary.
Okay.
And that Hitler, when he used the word Aryan, it was a race. In other words, it was hereditary. All right. So the nobility of the Buddha changed the word so that it's not that you're born noble in a royal lineage, but that you become noble, and therefore you join that noble lineage.
Right.
But the lineage has always been associated with royalty. with the best, highest quality people. Ha ha ha. Depends upon their education, I think. But if the people get a very high quality education, especially if you have noble monks that are teaching the noble kids, and that's what seems to have happened in Thailand. That the nobility of the monks and the change of lineage was wrapped up deeply with the nobility of the royal family through royal lineage. And we have several examples of that. In fact, I should remember the guy's name. Here's the example that I'm looking at. In 1860, there was a child born to King Mongut. He had like maybe 60 kids or something like that, and this is one of them. And by the time this boy was 8 years old, his father had died, and Chulalongkorn took the throne. This monk, or this man then, because of his family connections, he got the very, very best education. He became a monk. And then he was the one that started the Dhammakaya. He was the one who did the literature for the kids. In fact, he wrote a book that is now still used in Thailand for the children.
Huh.
And he was like the intellectual high-class dude, that he was not only of royal lineage, but he was of noble lineage of the Buddha also, and had that kind of high respect. He died in 1921, but a few years before he died, he was required to disrobe because they needed him to be the king. So he actually became the king, but he had a long, long series of students before he became the king. As he was royal prince, he was also a teaching Buddha, a noble. And that one of his students was named Buddha Gosajarn, who was also a monk, and he became the Sumdet. Now, the Sumdet Sangharaj in Thailand is the highest monk. Doesn't have to be exactly the oldest monk or the one who has the most panza, but is always a very high quality monk in Bangkok. And so during the 1930s, 40s, and 50s, this actually he died in 1950. This monk, Sumdat Buddha Gosajarn, was the Sumdat, and he was the one who was in fact over the council that Bhikkhu Buddhadasa was hauled into.
Huh.
So here's the connection now, and I didn't even know this until just the past few months. So that happened in the early 30s, and what Bhikkhu Buddhadasa was doing that got him hauled into the council was because he was teaching the noble Dhamma to the lay people.
Right.
And he gave, yeah, so that's how I got started. I think, in fact, that he gave a set of discourses to a nursing school, including their commencement. And so it was a very big public place where he was giving this talk. And the monks, they didn't like it. But this council that happened, according to the stories that I've heard, was that not all of the monks on the council were noble until the council was convened. And part of the council's job was for the nobles who were on the council to convince the non-nobles on the council, all of them more than 20 years a monk, what the real teaching of the Buddha was. That then started a literature search that was done in Thailand in the 1930s to get to the bottom of rebirth. And to find out, because you have heard that the story would be something like this. We are Buddhists, we are not Hindus. Hindus have a belief system that they call reincarnation. But we are Buddhists, we believe something else. We believe in rebirth. We Buddhists are not sure about the difference between rebirth and reincarnation, but we know that it's in there someplace. We also know that there's a distinction between Buddhas, between reincarnation and rebirth, but we don't quite know what it is, the difference, only that it has something to do with either consciousness or a self. So that in rebirth, it's not a self that's reborn, but rebirth still happens.
Yeah, that's always confused me.
Well, it's intended to. That's the whole point. All lies are intended to confuse.
Mm.
Yes, so that research was done, the literature was done, and they came to the conclusion that, this idea of rebirth must have come from much later times, because in the time of the Buddha, everything that Buddha had to say about rebirth was to get out of it. Do not get reborn. Don't do that stuff. All right, and then there's the other one, the guys who were talked about, I'm not going to get reborn. And that's the way that they would phrase it, or at least that's how the Pali sounded. That's translated into English is, I'm not going to get reborn. Just a subtle change in language would be, oh, I'm over that rebirth stuff. That's the best way that I know of not getting reborn, is just to get over it. Because it's an unfounded belief that has got no support other than going back to its Brahmin roots.
Huh.
And there is a lot of evidence about reincarnation, or let us say past and future lives.
Okay.
One of them was that a layman, a Brahmin, came to the Buddha to ask about the puja for a funeral.
Mm-hmm.
And the Buddha didn't want to talk about the puja that's being done for the dead corpse right now. He wants to talk about what puja is going to be done for this guy who's here asking the question. And then he teaches him sila. He teaches him morality. That if you be good, then you will have a good reward. And if you be bad, you're going to have a bad reward. Now, that's the way that the Buddha taught those who believed in reincarnation, or modern Buddhist, because that's what that teaching of the religion is. The teaching of the religion is, you do it our way, or something really nasty is going to happen to you someday. We'll get you. Even if you're dead, we're still going to get you. You better do what you're told to do, or we're coming after you. And we've got gods and karma machines and all kinds of stuff. We're coming after you, boy. You got to do what you're told to do. All right. So this is how we teach children. We teach them that all over the world. This is religion. It doesn't matter anything, but it does about exactly the story about it. But the answer to the story is, you can't get away from us. We're coming after you. So that means that you don't die, and you get over the fear of death because you don't die, but now you're left with guilt.
I know that from the Catholic point of view, but what about the other religions?
Buddhism, big time.
Really? How so?
Well, the Buddhists don't even have a forgiveness ladder. They don't even have that avenue.
Right, but okay. Well, in the case of Buddhism, where's the guilt?
Oh shit! Look what I've done. Oh, I'll have to pay for that someday.
Okay.
Okay, so feeling guilty about any little thing that you can feel guilty over, people will find a way to feel guilty about it, because that's the price that has to be paid for freedom from fear. And so getting back to that business of rebirth, what has happened in that realm within Christianity, you see, is that atheism is growing very, very quickly. People are leaving Christianity in large, large numbers, and have since the 1990s. In fact, possibly, I'm not really sure about any statistics or anything, but quite possibly a lot of those people who did come out of Christianity, how loosely or tightly they were attached to it, and then they came out. But many of them would go to Buddhism. And instead of then giving up all of their Mithra and all of their superstitions and all of their beliefs of Christianity, instead of going straight into atheism, they go into Buddhism, and then it's very easy for them to pick up the belief in rebirth. Or go into Hinduism and pick up the belief in reincarnation, because they've already been taught that in Christianity. That in fact, heaven is just one of the several places the karma machine can send you. You see, God's really limited. He can only send you to heaven or hell, or maybe make you wait.
Right.
Purgatory.
Right.
But the Hindus and the Buddhists, they've got all kinds of places.
Right. Yeah.
They've got dozens of heavens and at least 9 hells. Then they've got the ghost world, and then they have the animal world, and boy, is that a variety of stuff. How many different animals? So that's a different million different animals, or a billion. And then there's the possibility of humans, but there's all kinds of classes of humans. And so, anything can happen. Anything goes with Hindu and therefore with Buddhism, with their belief in rebirth. The only difference is within Hinduism, they say it's me that's being reborn, or my consciousness, or my understanding, which comes also along with my memory banks. Except that there's been very, very rare cases. One of them that is possibly getting around is there's some kid that somebody knows in India that knows some Pali Suttas without ever having been. Now, it would be kind of amazing if that were really true, but I don't believe it. I mean, I got to have that kid in front of me. I know enough Pali to know if he's going to know it or not. But you see, he's not that old age anymore. We're talking about 2 years. You can't freeze him at 2 years old and then use him as an example. So testimonies are no evidence at all. For instance, in science, testimony is of no value. Things have to be peer reviewed. So we need at least 2 kids who can do Pali at 2 years old. Long strings of Pali Suttas, okay? Not going to happen. But it is comforting to say, oh, well, if I learn a few Pali Suttas when I'm 2 years old in my next life, then I'll be famous. But it's always trading that guilt and basically an unsatisfactory life, a life that is kind of owned by the religion because of all of the rites, rules, rituals, ceremonies, and all of the belief systems and all the things to believe, that's the price that we have to pay for that fear of death that we get free of. And yet religion doesn't make anybody happy. No one is happy in religion. In fact, the higher in a religion you go, the more conflicted you become until you become fully a charlatan. I give you an example of Jerry Falwell Jr. Yeah, you've heard about him.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's all you have to say.
Right, so they're all charlatans at that high level. But what happens is in seminaries often that the guys who become Bible scholars, they want to keep their job as Bible scholars at the seminary. And so they only can teach their students some of what they know. If they teach those seminarians all that they know, then by the time the guy gets graduated from seminary, he won't want to be a preacher. And a lot of preachers now, because of internet and open information or whatever, there is, by the way, a website. And that website, I forget the name of it, but it has to do with clergy, ex-clergy, or escape from clergy, or something like that, a website. And they've got more than 1,000 registered clergy in the United States, still in the pulpit, still preaching, but who want to find community within the atheism. Because they don't believe what they're preaching anymore, and they're conflicted, and they want out. But many of them will lose their life, they'll lose their house, they'll lose their wife, they'll lose their job, they'll lose everything if he tells his congregation that he don't believe any of the crap he's been teaching for the past 20 years. But one of the things is happening with the new people, the young ones, as opposed to the old, because once we get really established in it, for instance, the older a person is, the less likely he'll be having a cell phone in his hand at any particular minute.
Right.
Okay. The less likely, the older someone is, the less likely they spend a lot of time on the internet. And if they do it in an easy place like social media. But real research, no. The real research is going to be done by students who have a project or have an assignment or have an interest. And so it's the young that the internet is giving the truth to. You have to wade your way through it, because there's a lot of crap on the internet, but at least everything is there. As opposed to when that teenager who is a teenager now, when he was a child, all he heard was bullshit. He got it from his family, he got it from his religion, he got it from how to feel, from everyone around, all of the way. So when we get on the internet as a little bit older and we begin to see the truth of it, this is one of the reasons that Christianity is dying, that it really does correspond with the rise of the internet.
Really?
Young people are beginning to figure out that Christianity is a huge pile of hogwash. But for some reason, instead of just being an atheist and just walk away, wow, yippee-ki-yo-ki-yay, I'm free. In fact, there's a Martin Luther King saying, free at last, free at last. There is no God Almighty, free at last. No, he said it a little differently. Yeah. He said, thank God Almighty. But the atheist can say, there is no God Almighty, let's be free. Unfortunately, they don't have the skills to develop to be able to say that at every moment, that they will still come back and get attached to the world and the religion and their ways of doing things that they know that they could be free from. But a lot of people who are leaving Christianity, they want comfort of another religion, and Buddhism is there with the doors wide open with this belief in rebirth. And so Buddhism is now almost destined to be nothing but a religion, because that central core of nobility that we know of that's so strong and alive in Thailand is not going to make it to the West.
Huh. Is that nobility you refer to it very strongly as in Thailand, but what about other parts of Asia?
Oh, yes. Anywhere Buddhism resides, nobility resides there also.
Okay.
In Asia. Within the Zendos, there are Zen masters who really understand Zazen and Sunyata. They got it.
Right.
The Dalai Lama, he's got it. There is a lot of nobility in Asia. But one of the ways that you can tell that that in the West there is no nobility is because look how they manage their organizations.
You mean the for-profit aspect?
For profit. In other words, if a teacher is a good teacher and he has Dhamma to teach, then let him go teach Dhamma, just like the Buddha did. Open sky, open field, under a tree, a few students, go to the park. Go to Central Park and teach the Dhamma there for free.
Yeah.
But what do? They say, oh, I can't do that. I've got to go build a meditation center. And so they wind up not being good meditation they wind up being not good meditation teachers. They wind up being good meditation center managers.
Yeah.
Because it's not noble. If you're charging money for it, it's not noble. There is a French saying, you probably heard it, noblesse oblige.
Mm-hmm.
You know what it means?
No, not really.
It means the obligation of the nobles. In other words, if you're better off than someone, then as a noble, you should not be sending your guards to raid his corn bin. If you're a noble, you're there to take care of people, offer them help, protection.
Right.
Not going after money. That's back in the business world.
Right.
Anytime the Dhamma is charged for, it automatically rots from being noble to being ordinary Buddhist religion. It cannot help but do anything else. It puts it mostly back into the position of psychologist.
Yeah.
Psychologists and clients. Well, guess what? How many psychologists go to their client for psychology help?
I get your point.
Almost never happens, right?
Right.
But two old monks who have been friends for years, they can count on each other because they don't want anything from each other,
right,
other than friendship. But that one up, one down relationship that is established on day one between the client and the therapist is maintained. That relationship does not come up to, like with our relationship, even though I do a lot of the talking, we have a friendship. This is not a student, client, and teacher relationship. This is just share the Dhamma.
right.
And that's the way that it is best shared. But when it comes for a profit, I'm already saying that, hey, my belly is more important than my wisdom to me.
Yeah.
I want that money. And if you pay me the money, then I'll teach the Dhamma. And maybe a few scraps extra from time to time, depending upon the situation. But mostly we're in business.
It's interesting because there was a guy, and I don't know when he died. I think it was early 2000s, but there was a guy who was practicing Buddhist, Bill Hamilton, and that's how he taught. He taught on an informal basis. He never charged anybody for anything. And interestingly enough, he was even as early as sometime in the 90s, he was very critical of the whole, what I call it now, the meditation industrial complex,
Yes, we have talked that word before. Yeah. And you probably got it from him.
No, actually, where it came from was one day I was reading about something regarding the, Eisenhower's famous speech about the military-industrial complex, and I saw that, and when I saw that acronym, I thought, well, that could be meditation-industrial complex, and exactly. That applies to all of this.
Well, so. Bill Hamilton could see what was going on way back when, And if he were still alive, he would probably be even more vocal now than he was then.
Yeah, I mean, that's not unreasonable to assume.
And I knew about it then, and I was vocal then, and I'm even more vocal now. The only difference between Bill and I is he's dead, and I'm on it. I'm on it. It's coming, I know. So that's the point, that this needs to be told in public, that the new generation of meditation students need to come from that group of young people coming out of Christianity to go directly into the noble. Do not pass, do not spend jail time in Buddhist religion. Come out of the Buddhist religion into the noble Buddha. That's the right way to go. I'm hoping that that can be available.
Well, this raises a good question, and I'll just ask it instead of prefacing it. How does one, aside from the whole for-profit business, how does one recognize Buddhist religion as opposed to the noble path, the noble Buddhism? What are the hallmarks that make it clear?
I would say part of it has to do with the language that we use.
Okay.
And there's also kind of a, let us say, an intermediary. I wouldn't call it a middle part, but an intermediary between full-on Buddhist religion and complete full-on nobility. There is a continuum in there.
Okay.
And that the Buddha himself taught in a noble way, so that instead of teaching Brahmins that they were wrong about what they believed, he didn't do that. That he taught them something of value for themselves. Oh, if you believe that, then here's what you need to do. You need to act well, that your behavior is important. We teach this to our children. Buddhist kids in Asia are taught this also, to get along with society. The question then is, well, what happens if you have an ordinary person, let us say a Chinese woman who is going through great grief over her husband dying? Are you going to start laying the truth on her? Because this is not the time for it. No, you need to give her what she needs in the moment. Well, I'm actually giving the first half of a story that happened to a monk friend of mine. His name was David, and he was in Kuala Lumpur at a Thai temple, and there happened to have been, the temple abbot was Sri Lankan, but they were speaking English. English is a common language in Malaysia, rather than the Chinese people speak in Chinese, but when they speak to a Sri Lankan and they don't speak in Sinhalese, they speak in English.
Interesting.
Okay. And so David was there, and he overheard this conversation, and he says, oh, this monk doesn't know anything. I'm at the wrong place. But he waited until the conversation was over, and then he told this Sri Lankan monk that he was from Wat Suan Mok, and immediately the whole flavor of the conversation changed. Because that's the way that it's taught in the suttas for the nobles, to treat non-nobles as if they're not really students. Students you can be hard on. If someone's a student, then you can give them what for. But if they're not a student, if they're just some coming up to you and asking you questions, it's not a good idea. You can lay something interesting on them, but you don't want to destroy their whole belief system.
Right.
Like the Christians, when they would come and ask me when I was a monk in North Carolina, what do you believe? My answer was, I don't believe in belief.
There you go.
Okay, but that doesn't mean that I can show you that everything that you believe is a bunch of hogwash and I can prove it. That's not the right way to go.
Right.
Okay, so that's also the way that it's taught. Now, this is what made Bhikkhu Buddhadasa so amazingly different, was because the nobility is always hidden within the Buddhist religion. So that only when someone was ready, when they started asking the right questions, they have to ask the right question to the right teacher at the right time in the right place, and then they're going to be introduced to the real noble teaching. Bhikkhu Buddhadasa was the one that says, hey, we don't have to do that anymore, that was old days, that was a time when things were dangerous, that the world is different, let's open it up. Let's start letting the noble Dhamma out of the bag, and if people want to hear it, they can hear it, and if they want to reject it, most people will reject it. I mean, it goes back to the noble Dhamma is very much like that issue at the beginning about somebody being celibate. Like everybody is in the monastery is celibate, therefore if everybody joins the monastery, humanity is going to die out.
Right.
Okay, well, the same issue is there with nobility. Nobility is for the few. It's not for the masses. You do not expect to have the whole mass of humanity become noble. It's just not going to happen.
Right.
It's just not going to happen. Even if you let the cat out of the bag and make it public knowledge, still people are going to cling to their views. They're going to cling to the stories, and especially if the stories make them feel good. And so a lot of Buddhism is about feeling good.
Hmm.
And so we give them rebirth as a toy. But if they become a real student, then that's actually the first fetter. That once you become a student of the Buddha, the very first thing that has to be done is you have to figure out that you're responsible for your life and you're going to have to fix it. Until you take that step, there are no other steps to take. Well, those people who believe in rebirth, even if they say, yes, I believe it, that I've got to meditate, I've got to fix my own mind, it's my job to do. They believe that. But then there'll come a time, but I also believe in rebirth and reincarnation because it makes me feel good. And so they'll do both. However, what they need to do instead is start dealing directly with the fear about who am I? So you have to deal with a bit of fear. Now, the easy way to deal with it is recognize, oh, well, the body's going to die, but I ain't here anyway. My job is to feel good when the body dies. And by the way, it's also quite desirable to have the job to feel good all the time, no matter what dies.
Right.
But that takes some mind control, because the instinctual way is to feel bad when something bad happens. And we define what is bad because we don't like it. Instead of recognizing, oh, well, that's a bad feeling, but I don't have to feel bad. I can change the way I feel. And so this winds up being the first issue. That's the second noble truth. Whose job is it anyway? Who's responsible? The second noble truth is the cause of our dissatisfaction. The cause of it is because of our greed, because of our ill will, and mostly because of our ignorance. And one of the things that we're ignorant about is I'm going to live forever because the karma machine is going to do it for me. Only now the karma machine owns my butt. And so we literally sell our souls to the devil.
Literally?
We sell our soul, right, and we sell our souls to the devil, and we give the devil a good name, like God. And they say, well, wait a minute. Isn't it better for God to own my soul than for the devil to own my soul? The answer to that is I don't want either one of these magic tricks. I'm my own boss. I'm the one who's responsible. It is not some karma machine that owns me. That when old karma comes up, I have a choice, if I can remember it, to behave according to that karma or to behave in a new way. And the choice is mine. The choice is not the karma machine's. It will revert back to the karma machine if I give up control, or it'll revert back to a God if I give up control. Basically, it reverts back to the religion because that's what I was trained in. But if I can say, wait a minute, I can wake up, and I keep waking up, and I keep waking up, and I keep waking up, then that's the way to live one's life. Because as I wake up, I can become satisfied with the way things are. So long as I don't wake up, I'll continue to be disappointed. Because God's not doing a good enough job of making me happy. The karma machine is not living up to his job. The karma machine's supposed to make me happy. I did all that good stuff. Where's all my good feelings?
Well, I just have to laugh because the idea of making your happiness conditional, making the conditions of your let me try again. Placing the conditions on your happiness on something that's external to you.
Yes. And magic, all the magic is always external. In fact, it's really way out there. That's how external it is.
Way out there.
And so this is the way that we can learn to live our life. It all comes back to sati. Can I remember that I'm the boss? Can I remember that I am not a soul that's owned by a God? Can I remember that I don't have to behave the way that I was taught? Can I remember that I don't have to feel the way that I was taught?
Right.
Can I remember to stop doing the things that I was taught to do? Because in fact, there's nothing worth doing.
Right.
Because all of my doing had to do with making myself feel better. Well, if I already feel really wise, really wonderful, this is good stuff, then what's to do? Everything stops being work and becomes a toy.
Well, and the interesting question is when things come up where there seems to be something to do, when I turn my focus back this way and try to look and see who's doing it consistently every time, I'm never able to locate anybody who's doing anything.
Exactly. Just process, one process after another process. This happens because of that. It's like dominoes. You've seen parade of dominoes and you click them out. Yeah. Which one of them is me? The answer is none of them. Not one of them.
Yeah. Like you got on the bus and there's no one driving it,
Yeah. There is a thought, but there's no thinker.
Yeah.
There is a feeling, but there is no feeler.
Right.
But with these feelings can be controlled. They don't. And if you look at it from let us say neuropsychologically chemical orientation, you can see that doing things to give yourself a hit of dopamine, giving yourself things that'll give you a hit of serotonin, and staying out of giving yourselves hits of adrenaline and giving yourselves hits of cortisone.
Right.
That's a philosophical or neurophysiologically the way to talk about it. I didn't get that word.
I knew what you meant.
Okay. That the neuropsychology is such that now that we're able to understand how the brain works, that's just more information for the students to recognize, wait a minute, that's right, I can change the way that I think. I can change the way that I feel. I can change the chemicals in the mind. I can change the way things are. That I am not who I thought I was. Everything can change. Anicca vata sankhara. Everything is going to change. If I let it. If I let it. If I remember. If I remember to change it.
Right. Well, that's job number one.
That's job number one, is sati, to remember. Because we've already been working on right view. This whole talk has been on right view, of coming out of those views about who I am, and coming out of my views about what I identify with, and coming out of my views about what the world should be, and coming to the state of, oh, boundless joy to find at last there is no happiness in that world out there. All of the happiness comes from within.
That's really great. That really finally kind of it ties up very neatly the whole question of right view. You know, that's something that it has been kind of fragmentary for quite some time, and I've been trying to put the whole picture together, and now in a moment it all comes clear.
Yeah, it's like that, isn't it?
Yeah, that tends to be how it works.
So in a way, you could say right view is having no view at all. But if you tell the student who's full of views that won't make any sense. What you have to say is you have to get out that view. You have to get this view out. You have to stop identifying this way. As Bhikkhu Buddhadas would say, nothing is worth clinging to as I, me, or mine, especially the Republican Party. No, he didn't put that part in. Because the people who are clinging to the Republican Party are going to have some hurt that they're going to self-inflict upon themselves. Every time they hear the word impeachment, they're going to feel bad.
Yeah, it's already a pretty uncomfortable situation for them.
Guess what's happening when they're on the way to the hospital?
What?
When they're sick.
Well, same thing.
Yes, exactly. It's the same thing. It ultimately is the fear of death. In the sense of the impeachment is the fear of the death of the Republican Party, or the fear of the death of the Republican Party as we know it, right. Or the fear of the death of my identity with the Republican Party. I mean, if after all they are the scam artists that they have proven themselves to be, then why have I been clinging to that all of these years? Now I feel guilty. I am part of this damage that I have done, poor little Christian me. I was trying to do the right thing. I mean, I hated the blacks like I was told to do. I hated immigration like you told me to do. I'm doing all the good little Christian things that I was supposed to do. But now I got to feel guilty for doing the right thing, because I was doing the right thing for the wrong people. And so there's all of this misery that's going to be there, but with right view of, hey, I don't have to deal with that stuff. This is what the word supramundane actually means in the Pali. The Pali word is lokatara, which means above the world. Literally become above it. The way that I like to speak of it is that everyone is an emperor of their own pile of dirt. Mental dirt. The question is, are you going to be sitting on top of your world? Are you going to be sitting on top of your pile of dirt? Are you going to be half buried in it, struggling to get out? Are you going to be completely covered by it? Both people are completely covered by their own dirt.
Well, to hijack that phrase, in the world but not of it.
That's exactly what we're talking about. To get above the world. To deal with it as if it were a broken toy.
Okay.
Yeah, we can still play with it as a toy, but it's not functioning the way it ought to.
Well, and it seems like that kind of implies, what do most kids do with a broken toy? They cast it aside. They've lost interest.
Except that this is the only toy humanity has, so we play with it occasionally. But the best thing to do is, let's get out of it. Don't need the world. Don't need it. Let me sit here and be happy. Let me sit here and be satisfied, content, enjoying this beautiful garden, or close my eyes and enjoy it in a different way. So that's the way to look, is that, let's come out of all of those views about the world. This is the primary word is Sila Bhatta Paramasa, and it is actually the second fetter. And that when one is free of that second fetter, you can say, oh, boundless joy to find at last. There is no happiness in the world. That's the part of the path of the Buddha. The first one is, I am not who I thought I was. I can change. I am not a fixed target. And not only that, but I'm not owned. I'm not owned by a karma machine or a god or a devil. I have not sold my soul to the devil. I've reneged on the bargain.
Well, it also seems like the idea that I am not a thing is in there as well.
No thing.
Right.
Not a thing.
Right. Yeah. Not a thing.
Not a thing. That was a good breath.
Yeah.
Well, this seems to be a fairly good place to stop. We've gotten a really powerful insight out of this.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm glad you're recording it.
All right. We'll put it up.
Yeah, because I saved these now. So.
Okay. We'll see you later.
Yep.
Call again. Darrell, I really enjoy our talks, our conversation.
I do too. I'm glad you're here.
Okay, bye-bye.
Take care.